So the overview of my EDA is, in this EDA, let us explore this Indian startup funding data and understand more about the ecosystem and the changes over time. This EDA shows the insights of funding done by startups and how the growth has changed with several factors. The aim of this EDA is basically to get a descriptive overview and a relationship pattern of funding and growth of newly launched startups. Another important aspect is to understand how funding changes with time, right? Because everything changes with time. People's mind, the generation, the era, the technological advancement, the way of living, everything changes with time, and we need to keep moving with time. So we are basically understanding how the funding of the Indian startup ecosystem has changed with time. Possible areas of interest would be uh, funding ecosystem and time relation. We have seen that cities is an important factor. So which cities has been the most startup friendly, uh, what kind of industries, and the important investors which have contributed to the Indian startups. So let's head to the analysis which we have performed. So this is my analysis EDA. So here, as you can see, I've just imported basic few packages and libraries. All these are very essential for you to perform the EDA. Matplotlib, Seaborn. Warnings is basically to filter all kinds of warnings. Here I basically use the command to read my data set from my system. So pd.read CSV, it's reading CSV files, and the file which is present here is at my desktop, and this is the name of the file. This is basically the location of the file. As you can see, the data set has been loaded here. And now the next step is I'm dropping the null values from my data set. The first process in any analysis is called cleansing of the data, where you clean the unnecessary stuff from your data set so that your data set is crisp and your analysis can be quick and perfect. After that, I'm basically converting the date column from string to date format. So all the columns which are here are basically of the string data type. So what we are basically doing is converting the date data type from string to date data type. So after that, plotting the number of startups funded per year starting from 2015 to 2020 until July mid. That is basically the duration of my data set, which constitutes all the startups which have been started from 2015 to the July mid of 2020. So from you can say from the last 5 years. And this is the code for that. X label denotes to the x-axis, Y label denotes to the y-axis, and title denotes to the title of the graph. And here I'm basically defined what kind of graph I want. This is the size of my graph, this is the font size. These are basically the characteristics of my graph which I have defined here, and the output which I have got. So as you can see, in each year how many number of startups were started. So in 2015 there was about 900 plus startups. 2016 there were 1000 startups, and in 2017 there were about 600 and odd startups. 2018 there was about 250 startups. 2019 there were about about 150 startups. 2020, mostly due to the pandemic, the startups have been very low to about 50 to 100 startups. So now I'm basically plotting startups funded per month by year. So here I'm basically plotting the number of investments made in every month of a particular year from 2050 to 2020. So this is the code for that. So I've grouped it by date, and the columns are January to December, all the months, and the kind of graph is a bar graph, and figure size. So here you can see each color corresponds to that particular month. So here in 2015 you can see that about 850 to 950 or about 100 startups were started in December 2015, and like that you can see how many number of startups were started per month in a particular year. That has been plotted here. And the next one is the sharing of funding by industry. This is one of the main aspect of the EDA, where we are seeing the fund sharing with respect to the industry, that is which industry has contributed to the most startups in India, what type of industry rather. This is the code of it. I'm recognizing, or I'm grouping it with the column industry. So every data you remember is basically grouped from the column, from that particular column of the data set. So I'm basically grouping the industry column, and I've plotted a pie chart. Here you can see consumer internet has contributed to the major part of the funding. Following it is technology, following it is e-commerce, where all your Amazon, Flipkart, and Ola, Uber, everything comes under e-commerce. Then healthcare, finance, logistics, and you can see. So next is which cities are most funded for from the period of 2015 July to 2020 July. So here also I've taken with the city column. I've counted with the city column, and here you can see Bangalore has been the highest. In Bangalore in Bangalore only there have been the most number of startups, of about close to 1,000 startups, and following it is Mumbai, Delhi, Gurgaon, and this is ranking wise, as you can see from the graph. So yeah, that's pretty much it from my analysis. And now let's head to the questions which are framed from the analysis. So the following questions can be answered with the help of the EDA. How does funding ecosystem change with time? How much funds do startups generally get in India? Which industries are favored by investors for funding? Does city play a major role in funding? Who are the important investors in the Indian ecosystem? What are the different types of funding for startups? What is the relationship between the industry vertical and investment type? How has technology impacted in the increase in startups in India? What kind of investment types to look for depending on your industry type? So the answers are for the questions post my analysis are: consumer internet and technology have been the most to attract the investors, where about 31% and 15% of them have been 31% of consumer internet and 15% of technological companies. So both these together constitute to almost half of the entire startups in India. So Bangalore and has contributed to 28%, Mumbai has contributed to 19%, and both together constitute to almost 45%, or you can say half of the total startups in India are either from Bangalore or Mumbai. Private equity type of investors account for a massive 44% of the total investments made to the startups of India, and following it is the seed funding or angel investors, which constitute to 43% of the total investments made to the startups in India. So private equity and seed funding are the major investment sources for startups. Both together constitute to almost 88%, or if you round off to almost 90% of the entire startup investments in India. So this basically tells us that if you are looking for an investment for a startup in India, you should firstly target these two kind of investments, that is private equity or seed funding. And finally, consumer internet, e-commerce, and technological startups have been attracting the most funding, or almost you can say that almost all the startups in India